Hold it! Hold it! Hold it! What dastardly crime are you up to now, Dick Dastardly?
A foolproof way to win this wacky race. That's what.
And now, here they are. The most daredevil group of dandy drivers to ever whirl their wheels in the Wacky Races. Competing for the title of the world's wackiest racer.
Alright, so Wacky Races. It's one of those shows that either you've never seen or heard of, or you watched Saturday mornings as a kid. Just in case you don't know what Wacky Races is, it was basically a show made in the 1960s by Hanna-Barbera that was about wacky racers, essentially. People racing who had very odd cars and personalities and abilities. And they all went head-to-head every week. And you really can't go wrong with a racing theme park attraction, in my opinion. I know it's been done many times, but I think this would be a fun and unique take on the concept. Now, the racing ride in particular we're going to take influence from is going to be the Tomorrowland Speedway, which isn't so much a racing ride, but it tries to be. And what we're going to take from is the ride system, essentially. Except with a few major changes. One, it's not going to be gas-powered. It's going to be electricity-powered because we don't want people dying from breathing in the gas inside these showrooms. We also are going to control the cars a bit more. So you can't, you're not going to be able to turn quite as much. You're still going to be able to kind of, control the turning and whatnot yourself, but it's going to be a little bit more controlled. And also the speed is going to be controlled a lot more because we need the groups to stay in groups of 3, and so that way the show scenes and the animatronics can be activated at the correct time. Whereas in Tomorrowland, the Tomorrowland Speedway doesn't really matter the speed. In this, the speed is going to matter. So basically, the ride building would be like a cartoon-style garage that would have pieces of the Wacky Racers cars on the walls. So there'd be like a buzzsaw for Rufus Rough Cut and Sawtooth, like stone wheels for the Slag Brothers, and a giant propeller for Professor Pat Pending, or even the Red Max. A major part in the queue would be the Arkansas Chugabug's red steam engine that would be like cartoonishly coughing up smoke in the queue every now and then. Also in the queue, guests would see animatronics of Penelope Pitstop, Peter Perfect, the Slag Brothers, and Luke and Blubber Bear. They would be mentioning to the guests how they are allowing them to race for them in this race and how they want them to win for them. Of course, the Slag Brothers wouldn't be saying anything as they only speak in caveman language, and Blubber Bear would need Luke to speak for him because he's always too busy blubbering. At the station, guests would find the starting line for the race. There would be 3 lanes for cars, and the queue would be split up into 3 lines, 1 for each lane. In order to get over to each lane, there would be overhead passages over the lanes that come closer to the queue. So there are 4 different cars guests can possibly be in. They would be Penelope Pitstop's car, the Compact Pussycat, Peter Perfect's car, the Turbo Terrific, the Slag Brothers' car, the Bouldermobile, or Luke and Blubber Bear's car, the Arkansas Chugabug. These types of cars would be arranged so that there are no repeats each time a set of 3 cars left the station. Also, each car can occupy 2 guests. The ride starts with the Wacky Races announcer introducing the location, which in this case will be the desert, and mentioning Dick Dastardly and his cheating ways.
You always felt that the narrator was actually there watching the race or officiating the race, because every once in a while Dastardly would break that 4th wall and look right at the camera and start talking to the narrator.
Better watch out, Dick.
Why?
You're approaching the end of the bridge.
Huh? Yikes.
While in this showroom, we would see cactuses and tumbleweeds on the left, and Dick Dastardly and his dog Muttley driving alongside us on the right. As you can see by taking a look at the blueprint here, aside from the first show scene, there's going to be 2 different possibilities in each one of these showrooms, also excluding the last show scene, which will have 3 different possibilities. You do the math counting the 4 different ride vehicles you could be in, and that's going to give you about 96 different ride experiences for this ride, which I think makes for some great rewritability, which is one of the cornerstones for a ride. In the next showroom, there would be two possible scenes that could occur. Half of the time, the guests would see Professor Pat Pending on the left, using his converter car to avoid rocks, cactuses, etc. on the ground by extending his car up over the obstacles while keeping his wheels on the ground. The other half of the time, guests would see the Red Max on the right, going over similar obstacles to the one Professor Pat Pending was avoiding, except he's going over them by flying in the Crimson Hay Baler.
And now it's number 4, the Red Max, making his move.
In the following showroom, half of the time guests would see the gruesome twosome in the creepy coupe on the left riding beside them. The twosome would have a rain cloud above them, raining on them, and occasionally producing lightning. Also from the attic of their car would come an animatronic dragon that would breathe fire onto the guests. Obviously not real fire, but similar to like the Forbidden Journey dragon's fire. One quick note before I continue. I hate the gruesome twosome. They're literally the worst characters in the show, and not necessarily because they're written poorly, but because they're absolutely overpowered and they have a massive fan base. Now you might say, well, all these characters have crazy abilities. How can they make them overpowered? Well, they have a dragon for one, and they also have ghosts and stuff like that. Like, they are insanely stacked. They literally have everything to beat people with, and yet people still root for these guys. On top of that, they're one of the most top winningest teams. So like people who root for the gruesome twosome, they think, oh man, I'm so cool and edgy rooting for the scary team. No, you're just rooting for an overpowered frontrunner. Like, congrats, good for you. Although maybe this point is irrelevant because the most winningest team of all time is the Slag Brothers, who arguably have the least amount of abilities out of any of the Wacky Racers. So I don't know, but that's just my opinion.
The creepy coupe is losing traction on the ice, and little gruesome shifts to dragon power for a little flame action. It worked!
What I liked about the creepy coupe monster car is that they would shift into various gears on the dashboard there, and you might have dragon power.
I love the gruesome twosome. They were great. They had that big old dragon in the belfry, and whenever they needed to get ahead of somebody, the dragon would just sprout wings and off they'd fly.
Anyways, the other half of the time, guests would see Sergeant Blast and Private Meekly in the Army Surplus Special on the right. There would be a detour sign in front of their cars as they moved forward. Sergeant Blast would be barking orders at Private Meekly to drive through it, but Meekly, of course, would cowardly refuse. So Blast would decide to handle it himself, duck into the tank cannon, and fire at the detour sign. After Blast fires the cannon, the detour sign and the top of the tank begin to spin. As we start to exit the room, we hear Blast getting nauseous and throwing up. In the fourth showroom, half of the time guests would see Rufus, Roughcut, and Sawtooth in the buzz wagon on the left. Their gag would be that the buzz saws they use for wheels would spin off their axis, continue forward on the track, and cut through a barren desert tree at the end of the track. This, of course, would leave Rufus and Sawtooth stranded in the middle of the track. The other half of the time, guests would see the Anthill Mob and the Bulletproof Bomb on the right. Similar to the buzz wagon, they would also lose their wheels, causing their car to collapse to the ground. However, their leader, Clyde, would call out for his crew to pick her up. Bulletproof Bomb would then rise up from the ground with the Anthill Mob's legs underneath it, supporting it and carrying it off across the track. In the final showroom, we would see Dick Dastardly on our right, and one of 3 of Dastardly's schemes could happen to the guest. Either 1, a giant fan would drop from the ceiling and begin blowing high-speed winds at the guest, or a bundle of dynamite would come out hanging from the ceiling, threatening to explode on guests, or Muttley would appear on the left side of the track with a fire hose spraying guests with water. As we exit the room, we see on a screen to our right a silhouette of Dastardly getting punished depending on which way he tried to cheat. If he used the fan, we would see him and his car getting blown away by the wind. If he used the dynamite, we would see him getting blown up. And if he used the fire hose, we would see him and his car get carried away by a wave of water. At the end of all of these scenes, we would hear Muttley snickering at Dastardly's expense. As you exit the ride, there are animatronics of Penelope Pitstop, Peter Perfect, the Slag Brothers, and Luke and Blubber Bear all congratulating you on the win and waving you goodbye. Of course, the only ones who wouldn't wave goodbye are the Slag Brothers because they're too busy beating each other over the head with clubs, and Luke, who's always sleeping. So yeah, that's my idea for a Wacky Races dark ride, I guess. I really just kind of made this ride because I really love the TV show, and I think it's kind of underrepresented in communities across the internet and in real life, I guess. It's just underappreciated, really. It's really a classic television show, and I think that it'd be perfect for a theme park ride. So let me know what you think about it in the comments, and if you want to take a look at the blueprint that you saw throughout this video, there's going to be a link to it in the description. But for now, that is all. Thanks for watching.